Let's get started by initializing our empty directory with yarn package manager. If you prefer npm, you can use npm instead. Let's run the command yarn init. We can hit enter on each step to select the defaults. Next, we will add some packages that we will make use of during the development of our application. The plugins are CSS Loader, HtmlWepbackPlugin, SASS, SASS Loader, Style Loader, Webpack, and Webpack CLI. Let's set up the main entry point of our application. Add a file called index.js in the root of your application's directory. This file will be used to import all our CSS files. Create a folder called source, followed by a styles folder. This will be the main folder where our style sheets will live. Add an app.scss file, followed by underscore normalize.scss file. The underscore lets SASS know that the file is only a partial file and that it should not be generated into a separate CSS file. SASS partials are used with an @import directive. We will use the normalize.scss file to store all of our default browser overrides and resets. Browsers apply some default CSS. We want to reset these defaults to something we can control. For the defaults to take effect, we need to import the normalize.scss file in our app.scss file. We also need to import our app.scss file in our main index.js file. We need a way to start our application. We will be using Webpack to bundle all of our code. Let's add a script section to our package.json file. We also need to add a webpack.config.js file. This file is used by Webpack as a configuration file on how to bundle our application. Think of this file as a set of instructions for Webpack to know how to bundle and read all the files that our application consists of. Line 1 imports the HtmlWepbackPlugin. This plugin is used to set up our main HTML file. Line 2 imports the path module that is native to Node.js. We use this module to resolve paths to local files on our system. Line 4 declares the module that we would be exporting. This is based on the common JS format of exporting a module. Line 5 tells Webpack to watch our source files for any changes. If any changes are detected, Webpack will rebuild our project. Line 6 specifies our main entry point of our project. Webpack uses this as the starting point. Line 7, 8, and 9 specifies the output directory and file name of the generated file when Webpack builds our application. Line 11 registers all the plugins we will use. Currently, we are only using the HTML Webpack plugin. Line 13 to line 25 specifies how Webpack should process files with the extension .scss or .sass. Webpack is built on the concept of file loaders. Webpack by default does not know how to load your different source files. You need to configure Webpack to know what loader to use for what file extension. In this instance, we are using the SASS loader to load our SASS files. We are using the CSS loader to translate our CSS into common JS format. We then finally use the style loader to create style nodes from JavaScript strings. These couple of lines allow us to import our SCSS files needed for our application. Let's set the background color of the body tag so that we can visually verify that our CSS is loading correctly. Let's update the entry path to be the root of our project. We can now run the command yarn dev to build our application. You should see a distribution directory created as soon as the yarn dev command completes. The index.html file is very basic. Only the index bundle.js file is referenced. The index bundle.js file contains the content of our normalize.scss and app.scss files. If you have the live server plugin installed, you can right-click on the index.html file and click Open with Live Server. This should spin up a local server and you should be able to browse the index.html file. The location of the local server should be visible in the bottom right of VSCode. If you see a gray background in your browser, this means our initial setup is working as expected. If you do not see the Open with Live Server option, you can install the Live Server plugin by clicking on the plugins icon, then search for Live Server, click Install. You might have to close and reopen VS Code to see the Open with Live Server option. We have now confirmed our project is set up correctly and that Webpack is bundling our files as expected. We can continue using the Live Server plugin to view our HTML template, but we can also leverage Webpack to serve our HTML file. Let's start by adding a new package to our project called Webpack Dev Server. After adding the package to the project, we now need to upload our package.json script to execute Webpack serve instead of just Webpack. You can delete your distribution folder. Our files will now be served in memory and no longer from the distribution folder. Let's run the command yarn dev. You should see a URL that you can visit to view your HTML file. Note that this URL is different from the URL that the live server plugin generated. On my machine, the URL is localhost 8080. When you visit this URL, you should see the gray background in your browser. Let's update the background color of the body tag to see the auto reload functionality that Webpack Dev Server gives us. I am updating my body color from gray to honeydew. Feel free to update your color to a different color. Click Save and go back to your browser. Wait a couple of seconds and you should see the page refresh and your updated color should be visible. Going back to the output of your terminal, you should see a compiled successfully message. This indicates that the changes to our files was detected and our project was rebuilt by Webpack Dev Server. You can update the background color again and save. This time, keep an eye on your terminal. You should see Webpack Dev Server rebuilding your project. Up until now, Webpack has automatically generated our HTML file for us. This is convenient if you don't need to directly make any changes to the main HTML file. In our example, we need to be able to update the main HTML file with some custom code, so we need to be able to specify our own HTML file. Webpack supports this feature, so let's get started by creating our own HTML file. In the source directory, create an index.html file. I'm using the HTML5 shortcut to generate the content of the file. You can manually type out it if you want, but the shortcut saves some time. This shortcut works by typing the text HTML:5. The IntelliSense should pop up. If the IntelliSense window does not pop up, hit Ctrl space on Windows, then click the HTML5 option to generate the content. Let's update the document title and add an h1 tag with some content inside. We now need to update the webpack.config to tell HtmlWepbackPlugin to use our HTML file as the template instead of generating its own. I am setting the inject parameter to false to demonstrate its usage. If your Webpack dev server was running, you need to stop the process and start it again by running the yarn dev command. After the command is complete, navigate to the URL and you should see the content that you added in your HTML template. Note that our background color is now white and not the same color as before. This is due to us setting the inject parameter to false. Let's update the parameter to true. We will have to stop the webpack command and restart it by running yarn dev command. If you go back to the URL, you should see the background color return to the value we had. Also, we can now see the CSS added to the HTML file.